This is Rocco Saboth with the enterprise team here at AWS. And I'm really excited to bring this topic to you. Um, DevOps is something that we talk a lot about here at AWS because it's an incredible tool that can be used in the cloud to drive innovation. And yet, through the course of doing dozens of interviews with large enterprise customers as well as partners and third-party industry experts, we've realized that there's some things that can really help enterprises be more successful to drive innovation within DevOps, and that's what we call enterprise DevOps. So. Really excited to share a lot of what we learned, and really excited to introduce you guys to Ajit, who is our global DevOps practice manager here at AWS, and I'll let Ajit tell you a little bit more about himself.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here talking to all of you. I consider myself as a builder. I really started my career as a software developer who started to build different things and went up this journey of over close to last 2 decades now. What I really realized in all of that is I'm really passionate about gaining agility and scalability to gain the momentum and speed. And throughout this journey, I worked at multiple small and large enterprises. Some of them were very large, geographically distributed, over 100 and even more number of team members. And throughout this journey, what was interesting was what we started to learn is now formally known as DevOps, but it wasn't really known as DevOps back then. We had all sorts of really interesting best practices that went into how to do better software engineering, how to write better code, how to do better testing, how to gain operational excellence. And as we are now in this world a decade after, there are some more formal definitions have started to come out. And enterprises have started to benefit from those. Many of you already know that's formally known as DevOps. In today's specific talk, we want to focus on how do we get, what do we see in enterprise space? How do we help enterprises adopt practices that help them gain speed and momentum without having invite a lot of risks?
Yeah, and that's Ajit's job here at AWS is to him and his team, go around the world educating our customers on how to do this within their organization. So excited for Ajit to share some of his insights with you guys. So all right, let's dive in, Ajit.
All right, perfect. So what we are seeing is almost all businesses, enterprises, small and big, in today's world, they need more speed and agility. The way we deliver software, the way we deliver business has completely changed. And we are living in this world where we expect updates every minute in all newer ways. Many times.
Yeah, what's leading to this? It's customer expectations. It's increased competitive pressure.
I think so. We all want this agility, not being caught up into the reactionary mode, but we want to be ahead of the curve. We want to understand how do we respond to our customers in more mature way. And many times, even before they ask something for, we find ourselves to be in this position that we know what customers need, and we want to enlighten them.
Okay, so delight them. And hopefully everyone in the audience is just aggressively nodding their head in agreement on this particular point.
I hope so. So when it comes to DevOps, we talked to many of our customers, and Rocco did a great job of meeting with many of them. What we realize is, while there are many definitions out there, we fundamentally, what we agree on, everyone needs speed and agility. And we also agree on the principles that are, if you build something, then you are the ones who's going to run it. No one is denying the scope of automation and what you can achieve with those. And we also are in the world where we are constantly going to have a tab on what we want to reach out to our customers with, which also means continuous delivery. So while there are a lot of healthy disconnect and there is a disagreement on what ITIL does and what DevOps does, what I really find is a lot of similarity on that where we agree on. So it's just what I want to work on is what we agree on.
Yeah. I was fascinated in speaking with customers and experts on the many different definitions that we got. But fortunately, there was these three themes that came throughout all the conversations that everybody was able to agree on. So in preparing for this webinar, Ajit, you told me many times you felt very strongly that DevOps is very much a journey. And so can you tell the audience, like, what do you mean by that?
Well, what we see is many big and small digital native or traditional enterprises, they have made good progress. And it's like a journey. You want to know, you have a dream there where you want to get to. You want to have reliability, you want to have scalability, you want to have security. You want to get to that operational excellence where you can scale and bring in agility for your team so you can innovate more. So it's a journey. You cannot change that overnight. And so while many have started that journey and many have accomplished a lot of milestones that have reached, but what really is happening, even if they have reached those, there is a little bit of a survey here that Forrester did in 2017 that many have started the journey, as we know, and many of you have also either have started or you're planning around it. Only 13% of them have really implemented all the way.
Yeah, this is a great survey that you should check out if you haven't seen it, from last year from Forrester. In this survey, Forrester actually called 2018 the year of enterprise DevOps. And yet, if you look at the data, hundreds of enterprise customers were interviewed as part of this survey. Only 13% of them felt like they had fully implemented DevOps. Fully probably has different definitions to different customers, but you see everybody else is kind of somewhere along the journey trying to get to where they're going. So that's fascinating. There's all these benefits around DevOps that are clearly understood, and yet the vast majority of us are still kind of on our way to getting where we need to go.
Absolutely. And as I said, there are journeys, there are potholes, there are curves, there are U-turns, there are lots of things. And many of them, these are challenges on the journey. And some of those we could be related to existing processes, or they could be related to how do we bring in governance, security, and compliance into DevOps. As you know, DevOps is where we are skewed towards heavily talking about SDLC and software development and pure software IT operations. But there is a lot more to it. When you talk in enterprise space, there is whole framework of governance that enterprises are used to have with something else. So is with compliance and security as well. So the challenge is mainly around how do we bring that into DevOps, or how do we align existing practices to still not drop the velocity that you have gained or gain velocity, bring in agility without really compromising your governance, compliance, and security framework.
Yeah, the anecdotal evidence that Ajit and I got from interviewing customers aligns totally with the Forrester research, in that almost every customer we met had deployed some level of DevOps, and they have pockets of DevOps around the organization. But what they were trying to do was get to DevOps at scale. And these four things came up over and over again as to either why they couldn't do that, or what was blocking them, or what was slowing them down. The existing entrenched processes they have in their IT organization, and then, of course, governance, security, and compliance. And then ITIL came up a lot. Ajit, can you talk to us a little bit about ITIL?
Yes, I think ITIL is a great framework. And it has been something that's holding before we even got introduced to DevOps. It provides a framework, and it's very common among enterprises because it provides them that framework they can work within and still run their businesses within their compliance, governance, security, finance, and many different functions. So far, in DevOps world, people haven't really talked at length or in more deeper way how to integrate those functions. And when enterprises start to start their journey on DevOps, first thing that comes in mind is how do I incorporate all of that into DevOps processes? So I think that's a ongoing challenge that many of our customers, many of enterprises in the space they face.
Yeah, we heard this over and over again. In fact, we heard more. We heard some very passionate points of view on this topic.
Exactly, and I think I like this picture a lot because it shows the two sides of how we think. Sometimes we think that, oh yes, we want to move fast and we want to have mechanisms that will not allow us to fall flat on our faces, but also have guardrails that way we can protect ourselves. But at the same time, we still need those enterprise functions like finance, inventory management, asset management, procurement, and so on, budgeting for that matter. And how do we still incorporate that? Can you really bake that all into your development process? And when you start to argue that, many times you struggle with right side of your brain or left side of your brain, or two parts of your same team, or two parts of organization. They're coming together, and we don't see often that they reach a consensus on how to move forward.
So you don't think this issue is overblown? You do think in some organizations there is a struggle between people who believe in DevOps philosophies and people who believe in ITIL?
I think so, because it's about the scope. Many think narrowly, and they think only it's SDLC, and other functions they feel left behind, and they struggle to see where do they fit in, and where does their role fit into the way they function in the enterprise space.
Okay. And so tell us a little bit more about this. Again, some of what we see on the slide is a little bit of a generalization, but it is roughly true from what we heard, right?
It's true. Today, we see that there are two states of mind. One is coming from the functional aspects of the enterprise functions. Another is coming from the pure IT development space. And so if you look into the traditional IT world, where ITIL is implemented, they come very strongly around how to mitigate risk, how to have governance framework in place, how to implement corporate and overall enterprise security, how do we have compliance, and all of those are very necessary functions. At the same time, on DevOps side, we have speed, automation, and iterative development, iterative life cycle, and also lots of innovation. Now, I think there is equilibrium in somewhere in between, where I don't think DevOps says that you drop the governance. At the same time, I don't think ITIL says that you drop the speed. It truly represents two states of mind. And what we're seeing is those who are being successful, they find the equilibrium somewhere in between.
One of our attendees, James, the previous slide depicted a tug of war. James pointed out he thought it was maybe more of a rugby scrum than a tug of war, which I really like that. I really like that metaphor. But okay, so even though these are kind of the general principles that seem to be associated with both sides, if you'll permit that word, you feel like there actually is, well, there is some truth to that. Actually, what the people have in common that believe is they just want to do the best for their customer, right? And so you do believe there's some equilibrium.
Of course, enterprises need good processes, and they need to turn to ITIL for a framework. But ITIL needs an update. ITIL needs an update to see what's happening in the industry, what speed we need nowadays. ITIL is also technology agnostic. It's more about overall IT and service management, and not laser. It's not pretty much laser focused on modern agile development processes. It's a framework. And then you end up with a set of rules that people are working with, and many times they are really going to the letter of the law versus the intent, the spirit of the law. And then, and that's where I think it's not DevOps or it's not ITIL. It's the implementation and the interpretation of the problem.
Yeah.
Is the problem.
Yes, this is really important. This is kind of our first big finding, right? And the first kind of big takeaway that we had is that we found over and over again, and Ajit's going to give you guys some very specific examples, but we found over and over again that where there were organizations who felt like the existing processes, many of which were based on ITIL, couldn't work with DevOps, they had actually implemented both their central IT process based on ITIL and their DevOps development cycles in a way that might not have been consistent with the original spirit of both ITIL and DevOps.
That's true. I mean, there are many examples that we can talk about. And some of those we see on a day-to-day life. For example, really equating deployment with delivery. There is a subtle difference. And in your software development processes, you want to have continuous deployment so you can find out issues in your life cycle. It also doesn't show that prematurely to your customers until you are confident on. So there is a subtle difference in delivery versus development. And many times we confuse ourselves with those, or not having mechanisms to mitigate the risk. We also see, and this is my favorite of one, is if we can't really, or we haven't made a lot of progress on our DevOps because everyone is asking full access to everything. So that's another one where the the intent is to enable your teams to move faster. That does not mean create potholes so people will fall or organization will incur additional risk. So on the other side, if you really look into ITIL practices, ITIL doesn't dictate that 100% of it needs to go through a change advisory board. I think the intent is to track the changes so you can minimize the impact and mitigate the risk along.
And isn't it interesting that in many companies, the change advisory board got renamed to change approval board, which wasn't necessarily the original intent?
Well, not only that, ITIL does not prescribe how frequently you meet, but I personally have been in the past in change advisory board meetings or approval board meetings, as you said now, in several hours. And they are going through 50 or 100 and long laundry list of changes that are going through, and hundreds of developers sitting through and explaining the changes. I don't think ITIL intend to or prescribed to do that. Again, the intent was to track the changes so you know what changes are going in, what would be the impact of those, and really having a visibility on those.
Yeah, and the intent, and one of the things that we were able to kind of put our finger on was this notion that in some organizations that run their business based on ITIL, the default sort of attitude and position around change was that it was inherently bad and it was inherently just disruptive. And so it brought this negative attitude towards any of the types of changes that were proposed for the business, which really were just around trying to serve customers.
Interesting that you say that. So now, is that our interpretation, or does ITIL say that changes are disruptive?
Well, so that brings up a couple other points. First of all, one of our attendees, Kamar, accurately points out that ITIL is going through an update, and there's a planned refresh that I believe is supposed to come out maybe sometime in 2019. So I think even the folks that are driving the ITIL framework believe that some of those practices need to be updated.
I think so, and I want to bring us back to the intent. I think intent, there is a lot of commonality on the intent, and there are ways and mechanisms that you can really make progress on both sides. Without dropping the intent, you can still gain agility and speed and momentum.
Yeah, the last thing that I'll point out that we heard from customers that's related to interesting about the slide is that one customer described kind of the pendulum swinging, and they felt like that ITIL had taken their organization and the industry to one extreme, right? Some of the examples on the slide. And then what happened when DevOps came in, there was this craving for more speed and agility and innovation, and yet maybe what happened was we swung the pendulum too far in the other extreme end of the spectrum.
Yes, and one of the scenario that I see a lot, and it fascinates how we do that, is in DevOps we create this self-service platform. Yet we dedicate a fleet of team members who are maintaining that self-service platform. So it's kind of oxymoron in that way.
Yeah. Okay, so we hopefully have articulated some of the challenges we heard from customers. So this webinar is all about enterprise DevOps. So Ajit, tell us what enterprise DevOps is.
Well, first is, if you really think DevOps and ITIL are mutually exclusive, I think there is a need to look more deeper, and introspection is.
And you've heard that, right? You've heard that they can't work together.
I've definitely heard it several times. I think what we see is very passionate people on both sides of it. But where we lack is, how do we come to an equilibrium without dropping the intent and really making it work for both sides of the world?
Yeah. Okay. So tell us some more about that. How do we do that?
Yes. So let's see if you look into the fundamentals behind ITIL or DevOps, there is a lot more commonality. They both surround around how do we provide more value to the business. We all exist to help our businesses, help our enterprises reach their mission, whether it's for profit or non-profit, it doesn't matter. We all are driven by some vision. And adding that value is fundamental principle that we all agree on. We also agree on minimal disruption. Again, whether you use ITIL, whether you go through CAP process, or you are following DevOps and you have automated tests around those or guardrails around those, at the end of the day, we want minimal disruption and we want to have a better experience for our users. Similarly, we want to have continuous improvement. I can't believe I've met anyone who don't believe in continuous improvement. So there is a lot more things that we agree on, and there's a common platform where we share the values.
Yeah, in some ways, this goes back to that misimplementation slide from earlier. A lot of customers associated driving business value with DevOps, and yet that the ability for IT to talk to the business was the whole reason that ITIL was created. And then if you look at continuous improvement, maybe one of the most common things we saw among customers that were running ITIL processes is that they were running all the processes beautifully, with the exception of the continuous improvement. They hadn't reevaluated what they were doing and why they were doing it, in some cases in years or decades.
Right, I remember sitting in long CAB advisory board meetings or change review board meetings, and we would figure out that, oh, there was a mistake that was made, but we never came back and closed it, or we documented it, but we never automated it or plugged the gap, so it would never happen again. DevOps, on the other side, takes it a little bit further and talks about how to plug that into your development process. But again, intent is to have minimal such kind of occurrences.
Okay, so they have a lot of core important values in common. Mm-hmm. So how does that translate to this new idea that we're talking about in Enterprise DevOps?
Yes, so Enterprise DevOps, as we saw in earlier, a lot of customers that we spoke to, we all agree on agility and speed. That is unbiased view that we collected from everyone. And that is something that I'm sure all of you agree as well, as long as we mitigate the risk. Now, when we talk about enterprise DevOps space, I think there are some few fundamentals that can help us implement it better. And some of those are, first is decompose for agility. Now, we have heard that a lot. We have heard about microservices and containers and all of those distributed computing adoption. But it's not only for hardware and software, it's also for teams. If you have a team that's too large to maneuver, then it's not going to give you a lot of agility. So when we talk about decompose every function that's too big, make it more smaller and leaner. That way you gain the agility. You can move the teams around, you can quickly form new teams, you can quickly get on to new product development. And that not only for IT, it's for any business function. So that's number one on my list. It's decompose for agility on the technology and for the teams both.
Great.
The second is build the culture of inclusion. And this is, while it is second, but my favorite, because it's easy to get confused. When we talk about inclusion in DevOps space, we have been talking about inclusion of development and operations, and to a certain extent QA as well. But when you talk about DevOps implementation at enterprise level, there are a lot of other functions that we either conveniently forget about it or we punt it down for future. I think those need to be included to begin with. And one of those could be finances. How do you include the view into finances and budgeting process into your DevOps processes? Another could be, how do you track your inventory? You want to, specifically talking about cloud, you want to know what your auto-scaling policies are doing for that matter. Are you going to exceed your budgets? Or how do you work in a way that you don't invite financial risk?
Yeah, we heard this came up a lot. So AWS and other people that are part of the DevOps community have talked a ton about culture in the last several years. And in fact, many customers, when we brought up culture, were like, okay, we get it. 2 pizza teams, right? But what we found was that there was some success in implementing that culture inside of the IT organization, but that's just not good enough. Because of so many other functions around the business partner so closely and rely so much on IT that we just need to extend that. We need to take it further.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. So tell us about patterns of efficiency.
So patterns of efficiency is something that we are seeing now increasingly becoming more and more important. So the simplistic way of looking at it is, how do we automate more and look into new patterns that can be automated? But it also extend that thought a little bit, but also focus on gaining the functional specialized expertise. An example of that is, let's say if you have a team that specializes in financial operations, then use them for it. Many misinterpreted interpretations that I've seen are teaching your finance team how to automate their use cases. I think that's not where they add value. They are deep financial expertise. They know how to manage company finances. They manage enterprise budgeting processes. Maybe the need is for us to go back and understand what they need and bring in our specialty from engineering side and helping automate that rollout process for them. At the same time, really using them as advisory for us. There may be a lot of things that you could automate, but there may be a lot of functions that may not have been automated. And the reality is, uh, a lot of times 100% automation is just a dream.
We agree with it as an aspirational goal, right? But it does seem to be one of the biggest areas of where there's confusion and intimidation outside of IT. If you have groups of compliance people and risk management and finance and governance people whose job it is to work with IT to protect the business, they may not understand the idea that you could automate what they do. Certainly not at the beginning of the journey. So what you're proposing here is that you combine the people in IT or DevOps that can do the automation with the expertise of those other functional areas.
Right. And I'm taking that thought a little bit further. When we talk about automation, you're looking at mundane, repetitive processes that are not adding any incremental learnings or values. So that way you can automate them, and your functional expertise or technical expertise, they can look into new patterns. And a great example is security. You can have security operations, you can have security engineering, but you still need a security science that team that's looking for new patterns. So there is always a room, and there is for more automation, more patterns identification at the same time as well. So what I'm really advocating here is, let's use what we specialize on. Let's automate what we can, but at the same time, let's not be unrealistic about what we can go.
We can't automate away all these teams of people. Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. So this is a visual representation of. Ajit doesn't love the term operating model, but it's one way to think about this visual representation of what we were describing on the previous slide. So tell us what we're looking at.
When we look into traditional IT, by the way, operating model, I love it, but it's something that always gets me because it's so fluid. But coming back to the slide, traditional IT, we have grown and we have seen how IT has been distributed in many smaller teams. At the same time, we have also seen startups that are very successful in doing everything with full stack engineering that you see on the right side of the box. Enterprise DevOps, when you look at the large scale enterprise operations, it is somewhere in between, where there are those functions like governance, security, compliance, and others that we talked about. They still add value, and without that, enterprise won't function. So in my mind, enterprise DevOps is inclusion of those enterprise functions into IT operations, like we discussed a minute ago, and really maturing that way organizations can move faster, bring in agility, and lower down their risks.
Yeah, this picture again reminds me of the customer that talked about the pendulum swinging too far in one direction, right? So we have too much specialization on the far left there, too much segmentation. And then so we tried to adjust all the way to the right, where we have one team of people that are absolutely doing everything end to end. And we have seen some large organizations roll that out, and in some cases there were struggles. So this middle picture, let's make sure we understand what we're looking at. So it looks like the line between the DevOps team comes down a little bit into the infrastructure design and operations layer, but not all the way, right? So there's some things that can be automated and done by the DevOps team, maybe like provisioning and things like that, but other functions that we believe should be outsourced to another group within the organization?
I think so. Instead of outsourcing, I feel like insourcing it, their specialty into our processes, so that way we can include as much as we can, with also keeping an open mind that not everything can be really, because you may even lose value at that point of time. You may not have enough returns on your investment at that point of time if you start to think that everything can be built in your software development process. Now, a lot of those aspects of those, I do believe they need to be added into DevOps processes, but I think it's all subjective, and take a critical look at what you want to include there. And also, like we talked earlier, it's a journey. You cannot go to the right side from where you are today overnight. You have to travel that distance. So pick up a small team, pick up a small area and start going in that direction. So DevOps, as I said, it's a journey and it's always transitioning and it's maturing as well. So don't really start thinking that I can be there next day morning or in a month time. Many of the organizations that we know took years to get there.
Yeah, and I know in a little bit you're going to share some specific advice for ways that our attendees can kind of start their journey. So so that hopefully some people are really excited about kind of this concept of enterprise DevOps and this visual representation. Let's make sure we kind of tie it back though to these concepts of ITIL and DevOps. You do believe that you can leverage the best of each, right? Is that a fair statement?
I think so, and there is a place for both of them. How do you keep the lights on yet move progress and automate more and bring in agility? You cannot really shut down your enterprise and say I'll open it again when I'm there. Yeah. So it's a fine balance of balancing it together.
Yeah. Okay. And so let's look at some examples of that. I mean, we just have a couple of examples, but I know incident management one was an area where you thought was a great example.
Right. And this is another one where we see a lot of discussions and very opinionated views there. Incident management is a built-in part of every enterprise, as if you have customer-facing applications or otherwise as well. There is not an enterprise that does not need it. So let's be very clear, everyone needs it. Now, how you do it is different. So for an example, if you start to mature on your DevOps journey, you may be able to eliminate level 0 support that you need a separate team for. As your engineers start to pick up the pagers and they start to do that. You may automate the whole triaging process. But until that's ready, you cannot drop your incident management process. So you have to go through that process. You have to attain that maturity. So if you really look at if all ITIL processes are where you are today and you want to eliminate certain things, you can really make it source and destination like a journey, and you can start automating one by one. And as you gain maturity, the function remains there. It's just handled a little bit differently.
Yeah, and so an incident management is one example of an area where maybe over time we can automate the vast majority of the functions, but on day one, there's a team of people whose job it is to protect the business, and you believe that could be bolted on to a DevOps
I think so. Initially, you need that. As you gain maturity, that process, part of those can be automated, but when incident comes, you do need to manage incident. You're not going to get away from incident management, whether it's automated or not automated, you need that.
Great. So this is another example that I felt was, when you were describing it to me in preparation for the webinar, I felt it was really, really powerful, and I'm glad you're going to be able to share it with the audience. So talk about we talk about patterns of efficiency in DevOps. It's a well understood concept, but to explain how enterprise DevOps looks at patterns of efficiency.
So I'll give you a more focused example around budgeting and financial models. And many of the enterprises, when they move to cloud, their whole model of how they used to manage changes from CapEx to OpEx. Not only that, but how do you even project their cost expense? What would be their cost pattern look like? And then if you think that you know everything that you can automate from day one, then I think that's overambitious. So how do you work with your finance teams, have them be on the same page where you are, how this whole cloud and auto scaling and pay as you use and all different models, and get them familiarity with them, build that into your software development process so they are still getting that visibility. Maybe you can just do an example, a small alert when you are 80% of your budget. So they know that you have reached that milestone. You can also show them the trajectory of your spend, or you can show the pattern. So they can have a pattern. You can also tell them, hey, here are the 5 different features that we are working on that may require additional infrastructure, or you're retiring some applications. So they don't see, oh, suddenly there is a drop in what we're spending, or there is a suddenly increase in the spending. And these finance guys, they specialize on, so they can accurately reflect that pattern into the books of the enterprises. So Going back to patterns of efficiency, if you do it right way, you can not only gain better engineering, but you can also gain overall enterprise efficiency. And that's what I call it patterns of efficiency. That's just one of it. Another could be your security teams. Security teams are, they put in a lot of hard work. If you're working closely with them, maybe you can start asking them what can be automated, how do I build better product, how do I incorporate those, and free them up from those tests if these are automated, and free them up for looking for new patterns. So they can be hunting for it, they can be adding value. So uh, that allows us to step back and look for patterns that are not yet automated. So you're really finding the pattern for the new pattern, right?
So yeah, you're helping both sides get what they need, right? So not only can enterprise DevOps provide value back to these business owners through the automation, but this visual shows that the enterprise DevOps team needs subject matter experts from all these functions in order to continually improve, because they may have the knowledge of how to automate the process, but they don't have the knowledge of the subject matter expertise that's brought by each one of these areas.
Right, and the reality is when we talk about subject matter expertise, they don't need to be in their own area of devs. They need to be talking to all other subject matter expertise to get a holistic view. And when we talk about automation engineers, don't confuse it with just automated QA engineering. This is more about engineering automation that you bring in more process automation. It's a generic more automation. But when you start to have this cross-functional education, and you can get all teams to view what are the better ways and efficient ways to run enterprise functions. And that's where the whole momentum, and you can gain velocity of driving efficiency within the entire organization.
And as far as the point of culture that we referred to earlier, this is probably just good for business as well, right? Because you get these, if you educate these people on what you're trying to accomplish in IT and why automation is so important, you get them feeling like they're involved and they have a stake in it, and it helps move the entire organization in line with what IT is trying to do, right?
Absolutely. And isn't it the same, one of the intents of ITIL and DevOps both that have the culture of inclusiveness?
Yeah. Okay, that's an awesome example. So, okay, so we've talked about the journey. We have to start somewhere. We're not trying to boil the ocean or whatever other phrase you want to use about taking off something that's too ambitious. So, I think, what do you recommend?
A lot of customers ask this, is where do I start? How do I begin? Would I be incurring a lot of risk? My usual place to go is looking for making small wins and gaining through that experience, because every enterprise is different, every application is different, every context is different. But you know what are the low risk workloads. Maybe start with those. You can automate. And many of our customers start with a small center of excellence. What they really mean is they start a small tiger team, a couple members, and they start to show a miniature prototype on how this might look like if it was full blown. So looking into those workflows that you can automate, that you can choose. My advice would be to pick and choose a workflow that cuts across several functions. That way you can start on a right foot of inclusiveness from the get-go. And that will not only train rest of the organization, but you will also understand it's not only technology problem that you're trying to solve, you're trying to get into organizational efficiency across the enterprise, the patterns of efficiency.
Yeah. So you're not just looking at kind of technical low-hanging fruit, you're trying to get some strategic value from it as well. I know you also felt strongly about the ROI. So you may not just want to choose workloads or an area that has the lowest risk, because you may make the investment and not get the greatest return if it's not something that's important and valuable to the business, right?
Right. So, like we were discussing earlier, focus on what you bring to the table or what you specialize on. Now, there is a risk of you thinking that I want to change this whole picture and I want to go to the extreme of DevOps in 10 days. And you might want to go back to enterprise and say, I need 100 engineers or 100 people who can automate it. That is too taking it right. And in practicality, I've rarely seen that happening in businesses coming back that, hey, here's the fund to do that. We all need to fund our own growth. We all need to fund our own innovation. in most cases. So if you pick and choose the right workload, you might be able to gain efficiency to fund your next workload. And that's how most enterprises have been able to successfully implement it. Sometimes I like to earn as you learn.
Yeah.
So that's the right way in my mind.
That's great. Okay, so as you mentioned at the beginning, there's lots and lots of AWS customers that are successfully using the cloud to kind of run their DevOps and their IT organization, kind of in the spirit of enterprise DevOps. I know you were going to give us a couple of examples.
Well, there are many examples. I think we can keep talking about it for the rest of the day and even more. But if you look into one of the traditional industry that we all like, the yellow M so dearly, but McDonald's have been able to move to the new enterprise commerce platform using DevOps processes, and we have helped them through our professional services as well. But what they focused on is, let's not worry too much about the legacy systems. Their ROI was, let's focus on the new workflows that they were building, new platform they were building, and they focused on that. On the other side, Edmunds is in automotive space, the largest data that industry has on the automotive sector. They decided to automate all of their publishing processes so they can reach out to their customers faster, better. And they went really to the other side of the house where they automated a lot of it. And they talked about it during last year reInvent, as well as how they do the zero downtime deployment. So their deployments are going, several of them, probably hundreds of them going every day, and customers are super happy that they can reach out to the customer at a faster rate.
That's awesome. I really like this example about SGN, because you mentioned some of your advice for the audience is to kind of focus on what you're good at. SGN actually leverages a service called AWS Managed Services to handle some of that layer below their application DevOps. Tell us a little bit about that model.
So what SGN did is a very interesting and unique in its way to gain the momentum on adapting to the organizational efficiency paradigm. What they realized is they could augment and they can get some help from the expertise. So they looked at AWS Managed Services, and they seek help in all of the infrastructure and DevOps processes and deployment, provisioning, in a way to augment the velocity that they wanted to gain. So that's an option where you go to the specialist. So many times you want to focus on what you do best, what you bring on the table, what's your core business value, and you can really go out to the experts. It's similar to, you don't want to build your financial budgeting model in your software development processes while go to your finance department. So similarly, you can insource or outsource or take additional help. It may be even time bound, that you are going in point in time and reaching out to the expertise to help you gain momentum. SGN, I like it, what they did it, because it's helping them move much faster, gain the velocity on where the destination is.
Yeah, the important thing for them was insourcing the application DevOps, and AMS basically gave them that layer to enable them to focus on that.
Right.
Yeah, cool. Very cool. Okay, we're getting to the end. We've got a few really good questions that hopefully we'll have time to answer, but I want to make sure that Ajit has an opportunity to kind of share his thoughts from customers he's worked with and from his own experience prior to AWS, and just kind of, for those of you that may be at the beginning of this journey, how can you get started? Some tangible ideas.
Well, I'll leave you with a couple lessons that I learned with. And many of those are the questions I get every day, is where do I start? So start with low-hanging fruit. We discussed about ROI, and start with low-hanging fruit that gives you maximum return so that you can fund your next move. So always look out for those that can be automated. They are providing you most business value. They are providing you most insights into how you can gain velocity. They are also cross-functional. So if you were to scale it out, what all things would be involved.
That's great advice.
Engage your entire organization. So don't forget, ITIL or DevOps, the intent is to bring in inclusiveness. And it's just not the process inclusiveness, it's also the functional inclusiveness. The roles, there are many functions and roles and processes. So bring all those together. So you're building something. Don't look at it narrowly as software development, fast track. No, it's a paradigm for entire paradigm of patterns of efficiency for the entire enterprises.
Yeah, so that culture of inclusion doesn't just mean different functions within IT.
No.
Andrew from SGN, who you just talked about a minute ago, he likes to say that his goal is to make IT the business and business the IT.
Very well said.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So bringing coaches. What are we?
Right. So there are a lot of expertise now has been built and is available around the industry, and many of those are available within AWS as well. But look to build the expertise within your organization. Many times you start with small CCOE, Cloud Center of Excellence, or within your team that you can create a pilot team. No matter what it is, the idea is to build a model, bring in the coaches that can train you, build upon your success, and start really train the trainer program so you can democratize it, you can socialize it, the entire concept.
And inherent in that is that you actually believe that most enterprise organizations can do this with the people that they already have. So if they don't necessarily have the ability to go out and hire tons of new DevOps developers or new skills, you think they can do it with the people they have?
Right. They can build in expertise from industry. They can reach out to us. We have professional services. We have partners. We have other thought leaders. We can help them.
Okay. So we're running short on time. So I think you guys will all be provided with the slides. So I wanna kind of get to some resources that we have. First of all. If what you've heard from Ajit today sounds like there's some things that you can use within your specific organization to make your innovation more successful with Enterprise DevOps, please send me an email to that's my email there, Rocco Saboth, rsaboth@amazon.com. Send me an email and we'll get you connected with the experts here in AWS that can come into your organization and start talking about what Enterprise DevOps would look like for you specifically. We also heard a little bit about AWS Managed Services as a tool for helping you jumpstart Enterprise DevOps. You can learn more about AWS Managed Services on the website. And of course, for those customers like Edmunds and McDonald's and a lot of customers who are going to be able to, who are already doing DevOps or who are going to manage Enterprise DevOps themselves, we have AWS obviously has an incredible tool set for running DevOps.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to try to, I think we have time to take one question.